going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Saw 5. So this is the second time that I'm filming this because the first time I was just rambling and I was like, bro, what are you talking about? So hopefully this time will be a little bit better. Saw 5 is the 5th installment into the franchise, and I do want to apologize to those of you who were excited for my Saw reviews because I kind of slowed down on them. I've had the notes ready. I kind of got caught up doing other videos, but now I'm going to try to shell these out a lot quicker. So Saw 5, I would say, looking back on it, without a doubt for me, is probably my least favorite in the franchise or second to least favorite. Now, like a lot of these films, the biggest praises I can give them are the performances, some of the editing, the special effects, and just an entertainment value that I think these films have as far as just feeling really tense at times. But what I will say about this movie is that I just don't really enjoy the story structure of this movie. A lot of this movie is told through flashbacks, modern day, switching back and forth between the two, and I think sometimes it gets a little confusing to follow, and sometimes it just kind of makes for a jarring, kind of incoherent story. Now, these films have always been wrapped up in mystery, and I've always thoroughly enjoyed the way that, you'll see one thing from one angle, but then you get to see something from another angle, or maybe something plays out, maybe a scene that you saw at one point, you get to see how it kind of played out further than you were able to see the last time, and things are kind of recontextualized. I think that's kind of what makes this franchise really fun. I think more so than any other franchise that I think I've ever seen, even something like the MCU, this franchise is a TV show, like you very much have to watch them back to back to really fully understand and keep up with everything that's happening in the story. I can't imagine people who were watching these in the theaters. I didn't see the first 5 in the theaters. I saw the last couple in the theaters actually, but I can't imagine people who were watching these in the theaters when they were first coming out and maybe saw the 4th film, for instance, and just kind of was like, yeah, I like that movie, or cool, I saw another Saw movie. And then when the next one came out the next year, they hadn't maybe revisited it. Maybe they didn't kind of really think about the events of the last one. And when you hop into this one, it can be a little bit jarring because it picks up right at the end of the 4th film, kind of showing you some scenes from the other films, kind of like catching you up a bit and kind of showing you things from a different angle, again, recontextualizing things. And again, I enjoy that about these films, but sometimes it can be a bit jarring if you're not paying perfect attention. Now, thankfully, I was paying perfect attention, but I still think that the way that they chose to structure this film in particular definitely left the film feeling a bit messy and a bit jarring at times. So right at the beginning of the film, we're spending time with the character that we'll spend the majority of the time of the film with, who is Peter Strahm, Agent Strahm, who is in this trap where he's gonna drown. He ends up getting a pen and shoving it through his windpipe, giving himself a tracheotomy so he's able to breathe. He ends up surviving, and he sees that one other person has survived without any scratches on them, and that is the character of Mark Hoffman. And we saw Mark Hoffman very briefly in the 3rd film, and then in the 4th film, he seems to be one of the victims alongside the other victims in the 4th film. But in this film, we learn that he is indeed working under Jigsaw, or at least he was, because at this point, Jigsaw's been dead for a few films. And Mark Hoffman is essentially his protege. He is the new Jigsaw. He's the new person putting together these traps, and he did not expect Strahm to survive this. So Strahm ends up kind of being suspicious of him, ends up kind of going on this wild goose hunt to find out if Mark Hoffman is indeed the new Jigsaw. And yeah, I really enjoy that element of the film. There's a huge chunk of the film that is this detective against detective story. You have this corrupt cop who is this wicked guy who is now the new Jigsaw, and then you have this other detective who's trying to figure it all out. And so that element alone, I do really thoroughly enjoy. Outside of that, you have the part that people come to these movies for, which is you have these 5 people inside of this trap that they're gonna have to slowly make their way through. There's different rooms, and they have to do different things to get themselves in and out of it. And the message that comes on, the little video with the creepy Billy the doll that we see in all of these movies, Jigsaw's voice comes on, and he essentially tells them 5 will become 1, and tells them that your instincts, your natural instincts that you've had all your life will tell you to do one thing, but I implore you to do the opposite. What he's referring to is that essentially the way he says it, 5 will become 1. It sounds like, one person is going to survive this. You're going to have to fight for your life to be the one who survives. But the idea of the entire thing that these people go through is for them to work together, and they would have all been able to make it to the end and survived. But because they're all selfish and not great people, as you learn that over the course of the film, they start killing each other off. They end up just doing selfish things and kind of becoming assholes, which get a lot of them killed off. And by the end of it, you only have 2 people who survive, kind of. You don't really see where they go, and I don't really ever remember them coming up in any other films. But they do survive, and even though they're bleeding to death. But what I can say right out of the gate with all of that is that the worst part about this film for me is that primarily this film is about a detective trying to find out if the other detective is the new Jigsaw. And in the mix of it, you have these flashbacks showing us how Hoffman became involved with Jigsaw, taking us to events that were prior to the first Saw movie. We got to see a young John Kramer with his goatee and a shaved head. And we find out that Hoffman has been working with Jigsaw since before even Amanda, who was Jigsaw's first apprentice in the series, at least for us as an audience. Hoffman was working with Jigsaw before Amanda, and we're learning this over the flashbacks. And at the same time, we have this detective story happening in the movie. And then at the same time, we also have these 5 people trying to get through all these different traps, being selfish and kind of thinking they have to get through it for themselves when they really could be working together. However, I think what made the traps and the really over-the-top kind of, horrifying part of the other Saw movies work so much better in the other films was the fact that our main characters usually were at least in some way involved, or the characters that were in the traps were at least somewhat important to our main characters. Whereas in this one, it just felt like, hey, the movie is really about this detective trying to find out if this other detective is Jigsaw's new apprentice, but we need to kind of give the audience what they want. So we're going to have these 5 people go through the trap that really don't have any major ties to our main characters or the story. By the time the movie is over, yeah, that part of the movie is entertaining, because if you like the Saw movies, that's part of the entertaining factor of those films, but it really doesn't serve any purpose in the story itself. When you look at the movie as a whole, it really has nothing to do with it. The 5 people who are part of the trap is just kind of something to kind of take the audience to the creepy part that they kind of come to these movies for, but it feels like what they were trying to do was tell a story of a detective against a detective. And I think that it kind of got muddled. If it sounds like a little bit like I'm rambling and like the stories are kind of a little bit messy, that's kind of how I felt watching the movie. Now, the performances are great. I enjoy the special effects. I enjoy the tension. I enjoy the editing, the way that the film is shot. There's a lot about the film as far as like on a technical level that I enjoy, similar to the way I enjoy some of the positive elements of the other films. I just think that when I look at the story of this one, they had a really good story. I almost would have preferred that they would have kind of followed just primarily the Strom trying to figure out if Hoffman is Jigsaw's new apprentice, rather than giving us this, trap house that these guys are in, these trap house, but you know what I mean? Like these people who are in these traps. I just felt like that part of it just kind of felt random. It didn't feel like it had any tie to the story. At some point, one of the characters in the movie comes across these people that are in this trap, but the people in the trap and the events that are happening in the traps have nothing to do with the events outside, really. Like they really have no direct tie, at least not in the same way that any of the other traps and stuff like that have to do with our main characters of the other Saw films. Again, I think it's better when our main characters are either in the traps or somebody that they really care about are in the traps, and I think that this film just feels like it kind of was disconnected from that, and they just gave us the whole element with the people in the traps just to kind of give the fans something that they think that they wanted. But when you look at the movie as a whole, it's a bit confusing. It's a bit jarring. We're doing flashbacks and we're jumping to these people in the traps, and we're in modern day and we're back in flashbacks. And it just kind of feels like a little bit muddled in the way they chose to tell the story. And by the time the movie was over, I just felt like, what the hell? I feel like I've just been rambling for this review. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you know that I tend to be a little more coherent with my thoughts on movies. And I think that that's just kind of how this movie makes me feel, more so than any other movie in this franchise. I do really want to praise, though, Costas Mandylor, I don't know how exactly how his name is pronounced, or Mandylor, I don't know how exactly how his name is pronounced, but the guy who plays Mark Hoffman, I think he's great in the role. I really thoroughly enjoy him in this series. And again, it's kind of the same way I feel about the guy who plays Strom. His name is Scott Patterson, and I really enjoy him as an actor as well. But again, I just feel like those two kind of were sidelined by the fact that the movie just felt a little bit jarring as far as the way they chose to tell the story. Even Tobin Bell, I think he kind of saves the movie for me because I just thoroughly enjoyed Jigsaw. I enjoyed Tobin Bell as the character of John Kramer, as Jigsaw. He's a great horror villain, but I just feel like the way that they chose to structure the story just feels kind of messy, and like, what the hell is going on? And by the end of the movie, Peter Strom does end up discovering that Mark Hoffman is the new Jigsaw, and he ends up following Mark Hoffman to his home. When he gets there, the house looks pretty familiar if you've been watching the franchise. I believe it's the same house that had to do with the nerve gas in the second film. He ends up following him into the house, going down into this basement level where he ends up coming across this room that has a glass coffin in it that has shattered glass inside of it with a audio tape to listen coffin to, you know, classic Jigsaw. And the audio tape tells him to get inside of it, and that's the only way that he'll be safe. He ends up not listening to the whole thing. Mark Hoffman shows up. They get into a little bit of a fight. He ends up throwing Mark Hoffman into this glass-filled glass coffin, shuts the coffin, and he thinks he's won, you know, like he feels like he's trapped him in this room. He ends up listening to the rest of the tape and finds out that he needed to have been inside of that glass coffin to have survived. After he's listened to the entire audio tape, the glass coffin ends up going down into this perfectly rectangular hole that kind of the glass coffin just goes inside of, which Mark Hoffman is now inside of, just watching as the room just starts to close in like the garbage compactor from Star Wars. And our main character, Strom, ends up getting squished to death. That's how the movie ends. So our main character loses and the villain, Mark Hoffman, wins. Again, I think the performances in this film are really great. When I look back at the film, I don't mind that Hoffman won. I think for me, what really just kind of bugs me about this film was the structure of the story and the fact that all the people that were part of the trap, you know, the part that I would arguably say was probably the most entertaining part of the film, has no real direct tie to the narrative. It just feels like it's missing something. It feels like there's something about the story that's not all there. There's something about the overall narrative that just feels a bit all over the place. There are things that are introduced in this film, like Jigsaw's wife, Jill, being given a box by some sort of lawyer. She takes a key off of her neck and unlocks the box, looks inside the box with like shock and awe, like kind of like surprised, and we never get any payoff to that until the next movie. You know, if this was a TV show, that would make sense, but as a movie, I have to kind of critique it as a movie in and of itself. You know, that you can have things that are set up and paid off from the past films or set up for the next film, but I think to have random scenes like that just have no payoff within the film itself, it just leaves this film for me feeling messy. So that's going to be my thoughts on Saw 5. Clearly, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I'm conflicted on it. That's why I have so much to say, because I really thoroughly enjoy the performances. I enjoy the characters. I enjoy what they're trying to do. I enjoy the idea of this guy Hoffman working under Jigsaw, but I just feel like the way that they chose to tell the story with the flashbacks, and then modern day stuff, and then the people in the traps, it feels a little bit all over the place. And by the time the movie's over, I really didn't care too much. So I'll be getting my review up for Saw 6 very soon. A big thanks to you guys for watching. Comment your thoughts down below. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this. What is your favorite and or least favorite in the series? And as usual, you guys will catch me in the next one. Bye-bye.